Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in St. Catharines. And folks, I'm sure you've been following the Alicia Hirter story. She's the entrepreneur that had a barbershop that she reimagined as a film studio. And well, of course, all hell broke loose. The bylaw enforcement for the city, for the region, went after her. And also who went after her was the media in this town. I'm standing outside the building where the St. Catharines Standard is located in. And of course, you know about that terrible story written about Alicia by Grant LaFleche, which implicated that she had issued a death threat to the regional director of health, Dr. Mustafa Hirji, when in fact that was completely fake news. In any event, I'm standing with Sandor. Sandor, you're going to have to say your tongue-twisting Hungarian name again for me because I'm hopeless at it.
Sandor Ligetfalvy.
Okay,
Thanks for having me, David.
Thank you, Sandor. And Sandor, you are a media critic. You're based here in St. Catharines. You've been following this story with great interest, as well as other works by the St. Catharines Standard. Yeah. First of all, what was your take on what many are saying was just a hit job on Alicia Hirter?
Well, it wasn't just a hit job on Alicia. It was a hit job on lockdown opponents in general. Alicia wasn't the only victim of the smear. Frankly, anyone who criticizes lockdowns in general was painted with the brush of beheading. And so that comment about beheading was based on a guy named Rick. His comment was, let's put his head on a stick. And I called Rick and I asked Rick, well, what did you mean by that? And he was joking. Yeah. So he wasn't calling for a beheading.
Sandor, but I have to tell you though, even as a joke, it's a horrible joke. I think that's offside. Nobody should be saying anything.
He wasn't saying the joke to Mr. Hirji. He was saying the joke to the previous commentator. The previous commentator said, let's use all means necessary, including force. Rick thought that was funny and mocked her with his comment.
Oh, so he was being facetious.
He was being facetious towards the previous commentator.
I see.
At, let's say, 10 in the morning on that Saturday. By 2 in the afternoon, Grant LaFleche had already sent it to his editor.
Okay.
He didn't give Rick the time to get on the phone with him. So that's not journalistic ethics. You don't just take a comment, assume at face value what it means, and then put it in the newspaper.
Still, I think there's two lessons here. One is that in the world of social media, online correspondence, if you will, the opportunity for inflection, the opportunity for, saying something sarcastic, it's different in the printed word than it is when you're actually having a discussion. So maybe people should steer away from even being facetious when they're, responding to another commentator.
I think he took that lesson clearly. He also described his day as he checked his messages, saw the thing, hit a thing, and went out on his ATV. So he's out spending his day out. He's not like maybe a lot of people, like media people, are plugged in and very careful about every little thing they say. We have different sort of priorities with different people. So I completely take the point that he shouldn't have said that, but it's a mistake. It's not a death threat. And so what happened in this story is that uncharitable interpretation, beheading, was created out of that comment, which was facetious, and then that was applied to someone else in this community, Mark Wood, who is he was on the board of directors for the St. Catharines Downtown Association, and he was a lockdown critic, and he clicked like on Rick's comment, and so it was reported as he clicked like on a call for beheading. Well, that's so not true. So the February 13th story, which is what I call it, and I'm calling for the St. Catharines Standard and the Toronto Star to retract the February 13th story, because the February 13th story was clarified. So you read it on your show and put it in your reports that the lead of the February 13th story was clarified, that they removed that section that mentioned a salon the salon was removed out of the story.
Right, and clearly they were referring to Alicia Hirter as being one of the people issuing a death threat. That is complete fake news. She had nothing to do with it. In fact, she's been receiving death threats, to her for having the temerity to open her business during a lockdown. So the thing is, after our report aired, you're right, Sandor, the St. Catharines Standard corrected the online version. They took out the salon owner, a.k.a. Alicia Hirter, but they didn't do anything in print, did they?
To my knowledge, there's been no printed clarifications or corrections. The clarification was at the bottom of the story, and then it appeared at the top of the story much later. So the story itself is a paywall story. So the audience, this isn't just some story that has text on a screen, take it or leave it. This is the story that Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford and hundreds of other politicians and influencers retweeted and made noise out of.
That's correct. Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford did weigh in on Twitter about this.
That's right. And so this story matters a lot more than just defamation of Alicia Hirter, in my view. What got me involved in this, I support Alicia and what she's doing, but I didn't actually talk to her or knew her before February 13th.
Okay.
On February 13th, I saw that story. I knew instantly it was a hit piece, and I knew who it was coming from. And that's why you're talking to me. We're talking about St. Catharines Standard investigative reporter Grant LaFleche.
Right.
My first encounter with Grant LaFleche in this domain was his coverage of Hugs Over Masks. So I was involved in Hugs Over Masks, and he had very uncharitable interpretations. And I have examples on my Twitter, and I started a hashtag Niagara's best journalist. And, there's
now you're being facetious.
Yeah, well, he really is the most prominent, hardest working, most prolific journalist in Niagara.
Okay.
Without being facetious, if you ask anyone else, they might actually believe that he's Niagara's best. Okay. And I don't want to take away from his good work.
Okay.
I don't want to smear everything he's ever done. But when you're in a position of power and you abuse your power, you bully, you cause harm, then no matter how good you are, we require accountability.
And if I can say, a few weeks ago, we did reach out to Grant LaFleche. We're all about telling the other side of the story. Seems he's really good at dishing it out, not so good at taking it. Check out my brief interview with him.
LaFleche speaking.
Yeah, hi there, Grant. It's David Menzies calling from Rebel News. How you doing there?
I do for you, Mr. Menzies.
Pardon me? Sorry?
I do for you, Mr. Menzies. I'm very busy.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Listen, I'm just doing a story on Chrome Barbering, and I came across some of your pieces, and there was one in which the story is kind of implicating Alicia Hirter in terms of giving a death threat to Niagara's acting medical officer of health.
Sorry to not do that, Mr. Menzies, and I don't really have any comment for you.
Oh, okay. It's your story, though, isn't it? I mean, I'll read it to you. It says, opponents of Niagara's...
Read me my story, Mr. Menzies. The story does not implicate Ms. Hirter in anything other than the post that she made. You're well aware of that.
Well, did she make a post? Sir, didn't she make a post advocating for violence or death? Hung up. He's very busy. So there you have it. He hung up the phone on us. I've reached out to the editor-in-chief. No return call there as well. So, it just shows you something, I think, about the mainstream media, my friend. And that is, as I said earlier, really good at dishing it out, really good at shining the magnifying glass on a subject. But when it's turnabout, they don't consider it fair play.
No, absolutely. The activists are held to account for the comments in their fringes. But if you look at the replies on mainstream media articles, their followers are aggressive, they're mean, and they're willing to be petty. They're willing to dox and harass and threaten, and worse. Who knows how bad they could get. At this point, we have the case of Alicia, who, and you've done a great job at expounding all of the different cases of harassment and threats that she's faced just for becoming a public figure, which was selective on behalf of the newspaper. You gave Alicia, you and other media in Canada gave Alicia some coverage, and as a consequence, the local media gave her a different angle of coverage.
And, I'm not surprised because we've been covering the so-called Yahoo Nation protests, the anti-lockdown protests going back to April of last year, Sandor. And I can tell you, with few exceptions, the mainstream media are sitting this out. I think they are pro-lockdown. They are pro-big government. I mean, for goodness sakes, without taxpayer bailouts, they're not in business anymore. So, in a sense, I think that's the motivating drive to go after a single mother, a female entrepreneur, just trying to stay afloat by opening her business because they're on Team Trudeau.
Well, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. She took a stand. That cannot be tolerated. That's why this has happened. But you mentioned Yahoo Nations. Yes. Doug Ford said Yahoos in response to whose question, you wonder? Grant LaFlèche's.
Your first question comes from Grant LaFlèche with St. Catharines Standard. Please go ahead.
Hi, Grant.
Grant LaFlèche took a comment in a Facebook group, which was somebody made a joke about spoofing Doug Ford's contact information for contact tracing. And so LaFlèche took that as if Hugs Over Masks was promoting spoofing and said in his question to Doug Ford that day, what do you think about Hugs Over Masks promoting spoofing?
Hi, Premier. Thank you for taking the call.
Thank you.
You're probably aware, sir, that there are, it sort of relates to the overall attempt to kind of bring the numbers down in this province. There are groups that are actively attempting to get people to avoid public health measures. The most popular group known as Hugs Over Masks. Here in the Niagara region, at least, they're encouraging people to try to spoof contact tracing by providing false names and phone numbers when they go to restaurants and other businesses that record that information for the public health unit should it be necessary. And one of the names and numbers that they're encouraging people to use, sir, is yours. So we just wanted to know if you, A, have a reaction generally to what these groups have been doing recently and the fact that they want folks to use your name and number to spoof public health contact tracing efforts.
Well, I was the administrator of that group. We weren't promoting spoofing.
And Grant knows what he's doing, doesn't he? I mean, he's deliberately muddying the waters so to get the question to fit his narrative.
I think it's very important that we understand that the person we're talking about is the person who set the ball right down the plate for Doug to hit that home run. Sure. Yahoos. Grant LaFlèche threw that fastball to Doug so that we could be the Yahoo Nation.
Like, that's being played. I'm being played with Yahoos.
So it really, the focus on Grant LaFlèche, that people say it's a small town, it's a tiny newspaper. Actually, this is a big media pyramid. And this story, February 13th story, it affected the entire social and cultural experience because we perceive, what do people perceive of lockdown opponents? Are they crazy enough to behead the Dr. Hirter for being in gray instead of red or red instead of gray? Yeah. Lockdown opponents aren't that crazy, but the media, in this case, we know who we're talking about, took that and smeared it across everyone, which makes the discourse much, much harder.
Well, Sandor, I want to thank you. I didn't know until we met and you talked about the death threat that this whole thing was a hoax, for lack of a better term. There wasn't really a death threat, at least not to Dr. Hirter. And secondly, it was Grant LaFlèche that set up the catalyst for Doug Ford saying the infamous Yahoo Nation, his basket full of deplorables moment. And the real victim here is Alicia, because she's being driven out of business by these nefarious types, and she is the victim of death threats that she's received online and on voicemail. Takeaway comment, my friend.
Well, that's why Alicia now has a crowdfund. So there's an Alicia Hirter GoFundMe, which now is up to $7,000 or $8,000. It started last week, and it started as a direct result of the defamation that we've been discussing. Yeah. So I encourage your audience to check out that crowdfund, to find me through my hashtags at Niagara's Best Journalist, retract February 13th. I think it's very important we all support the call to retract the February 13th story. They can't reference this in the future as if it's a moment in history. It wasn't a moment in history. It was a moment in clickbait propaganda.
Gotcha. And there you have it, folks. I mean, Grant LaFlèche, he can hang up the phone on me. His editor can refuse to return my calls and emails, but They can't refuse to go before a judge if this defamation suit goes through and say what they have to say. And in closing, what was it back in, I believe, 2016, Sean Hannity said about the mainstream media? Oh, yes. Journalism is dead. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Are you an operator of a small business and you're ready to take a stand against big government telling you that your doors have to remain shut as the public sector carries on? Well, reach out to us at iwillopen.com. That's iwillopen.com. Tell us your story and we'll tell the world your story as well.